I always love the opportunity to interview women who have accomplished so much, especially in the tech industry. And today is no different. Another amazing opportunity to talk to somebody who has not only served in the United States Navy, but helps women in STEM related fields and has done a variety of jobs within the technology sector. Today, we welcome Julie Vida. Julie, how are you doing today?
Hi, Teresa. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I thank you for agreeing to come on. And so I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Julie, and then we're just going to get right into the questions. If you're following me on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, please be sure on YouTube to subscribe to the channel. If it's on LinkedIn, you can hit follow and never miss an episode. Please tell your friends, your family, and you're more than welcome while we're doing the episode to leave a comment in the chat window, and we will try to get into that as we go through the call. But to get started, today we're talking to Julie Vida, a distinguished technology and business executive with a career that spans military service, high-impact roles with the public sector, and leadership in the tech industry. Currently, she leads the growth team for the defense sector at ManTech, focusing on innovative solutions to secure the Department of Defense's future. With past roles like Group President and Chief Strategy Advisor for the public sector at Splunk and Executive Partner at Gartner, Julie brings deep insight into the intersection of data, analytics, and government. Today, we'll talk about her 24-year service in the U.S. Navy, where she served as both a surface warfare officer and naval aviator. So we both have that in common. We did the airfields and we did the SWO fields, earning high honors like the Navy Air Medal for bravery in armed conflict during Operation Enduring Freedom. Transferring from the military to the tech industry, she leveraged her expertise as the Navy's Deputy Chief Information Officer, overseeing technology policy, investments, and cybersecurity. And a passionate advocate for veterans and women in tech, we'll discuss her work mentoring, transitioning military personnel, and encouraging women and girls to pursue STEM careers. So today we're going to talk about leadership, resilience, and meaningful impact in both the public and private sectors. Welcome again, Julie.
Thanks so much.
So first off, I always ask all my guests who have served in the United States military, where are you originally from and what inspired you to raise your right hand?
I was born, I'm a Jersey girl. So I was born in Bayonne, New Jersey. Sorry, I was born in Jersey City. We lived in Bayonne way before they were cool. Things have changed a lot in Northern Jersey, but born there, lived for about 5 years, then moved to Pennsylvania, and the rest of our lives, we grew up in Southern Pennsylvania. So when I was in high school, I have a twin sister. She also served in the Navy. Yep. She retired as a Master Chief. And
an identical twin?
Yes.
Oh gosh, that's interesting.
Yes. And when we were in high school, I was college track, going to go to school and all that stuff and following what all my friends were doing. And she, on a fluke one day, was walking by a recruiting office in good old Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was where we spent most of our childhood. And she talked to a recruiter and ended up agreeing to do the delayed entry into the Navy as a linguist, as a cryptologist, cryptologic technician, interpreter. And she came home and told me this. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, what are you talking about? That wasn't in our world.
Right.
Our dad was a veteran and we had uncles who were veterans, but we weren't raised to, you're going to go in the service. And so she said, no, but we both really love foreign languages. And she said, but I signed up to go to language school and we could go together and be spies or something. And I was like, oh, that sounds pretty good. And she said, and they'll pay for college and everything. And I said, okay. So she talked me into it. I dep in, we go to boot camp together. And that's why I joined the Navy, because of my sister. And then it was all going to be minimum time, get my degree, get my money for college, and go back and do whatever I thought I was going to do with my life. And of course, none of that happened. And I went to language school, and I was a Russian we were both Russian linguists. And this was before the wall came down in 1988. And so we were all jazzed about going to help fight the Russians and Soviets and stuff. And then my path took me to the Naval Academy, and that's how I became a naval officer, and ended up doing a full career, and every step along the way was something I never planned for and didn't expect, and was awesome.
That's so interesting. I didn't know you were prior enlisted. I knew you were an academy grad, but I had
Yeah.
no idea that you were prior enlisted. What was it like to go to the Naval Academy as a prior enlisted sailor?
For me, it was, I loved all that structure and PT, not really the physical part of the PT, but like the structure of the PT and the rules. I'm a hopeless rule follower to this day. And to go from being enlisted to the academy was just more of that.
Mhm.
I was enlisted for 2 years. So I don't like people to think, "Oh, I did a full career as Mustang and then,
Sure.
then went into the officer community." But I did 2 years of language training at Defense Language Institute, and from there I went right to the Naval Academy. So, but hey, we, swabbed the deck and we scrubbed heads and we
Yeah, you still did the
field
thing.
day, and we used to buff our floor with the wax thing and buff the deck. And so went to the Naval Academy and did more of that stuff. And I was like, great. I love
Yeah.
this stuff. Yeah.
So after the Naval Academy, where do you go next?
Well, fortune shines on me again, and I'm with the great class of 1994. And the women in my class were the recipients of, well, we were the benefactors of the law changing right before we did service selection, which allowed women to go into combat roles. So when we graduated, when we started, we did not expect that we would be able to do anything like combat ships or flying or anything. We would follow in what women had done up to that point: unrestricted line, supply corps, supply ships, and things like that. So the law changes and we graduate, and I was fortunate to choose a guided missile destroyer as my first tour, as my first ship. And along with that came a fantastic commanding officer, Jim Stavridis, who went on to be a
Woo,
two-time combatant commander. He's a prolific author. He's on
of
all the morning
course.
shows. He was our commanding officer, and he made it very clear that the women were not to be treated any different than the men, to include being allowed to make mistakes and learn from them. And I thank God all the time for that
Yeah.
experience, because things could have turned out a lot differently if I hadn't been in that kind of environment. So then I started my SWO career on DDG 52, second ship in the class, now super old. Yeah.
Wow. I was on DDG 59. So that was my first ship as a surface warfare officer. And
Yeah.
so I loved what you said about being able to make a mistake. I think that as women, there's this mindset that we have to be perfect because everybody is kind of looking to us to fail, or they think we might fail because we're a woman. And so there are those people that think that it's not okay to fall, to, I guess,
Right.
fail forward, but that's like how you learn. I mean, everybody's going to fail. So
That-
it was
Yes.
wonderful he created that culture. How do you how did he do that? Can you give me any specifics?
Yes. In fact, one I remember particularly, I was the collateral duty public affairs officer for the ship. So I wrote the Barry Bugle, the newsletter, and we used to, on like, good old typewriter. And oh
Yeah.
no, wait, maybe we had some word processing and clip art, whatever. And so I was the conduit from like the local news that wanted to do all these stories about women on the ship.
Hmm.
And so I got then Commander Stavridis to be interviewed or to be somehow involved in the news. And the first words out of his mouth were, "The story here is that there is no story. It's not news. These are junior officers that are coming into the fleet, and they're going to do great things, and they're going to fail, and they deserve to be treated just like all the other junior officers in the wardroom." And I'll never forget it. So that was a very public, very open statement, and it was something he knew he needed to do as the leader of the crew. And they respected him so much. There was never a problem that I know of on the ship.
Wow. I mean, to just have that kind of transparency. And I just
Yeah.
put you on full screen a few times. I might do that throughout the call just when you're talking, just to kind of have that full picture of what you're saying, and allowing the audience to absorb that. Um, so that was your first ship. You were a surface warfare officer, and sounds like it was a great tour. What's next after that?
So I go to my next tour for my second division officer tour. But by that time, I had already asked the Navy to do a lateral transition into Naval Aviation. And I did that because I was married at the time to a classmate who had always wanted to fly. And so at that time, the Navy had drawn down their officer corps so much that they needed people to stay in. We used to call it the T-notch, the year groups of 92, 90, 93, 94, 95. And we were at the bottom of it, class of 94. And that was like, they were at the lowest manning levels. So we thought, well, let's ask the Navy if they'll let us both transition to aviation. And if they won't, we'll get out. And so guess what? They let us do it. And so we transitioned to Naval Aviation. And I had to go to my second ship because I had already accepted orders. And I went to an aircraft carrier. I went to USS Theodore Roosevelt. And it was interesting because when I first got accepted to flight school, I thought, I'm going to be the first female Blue Angel pilot. You know, I'm going to be an F-18 pilot and all this. First. And then I get to the carrier and I start to kind of notice that, let's just say the personalities of different types of aviators are different. And there's fighter pilots and there's helo pilots and there's fixed wing. And so that was kind of my first inkling that maybe the fighter community isn't really for me. And then I go off to flight school and it was hard. It is not all playing volleyball on the beach. You know, it is hard in ground school, the water survival. There were a lot of times I thought, what the heck am I doing here? You know, I don't belong here. Like really, not just imposter syndrome, but what the, is going on around here with the dunker and all this crazy stuff.
Oh, the dunker was insane. I had such a tough time with that thing.
Oh. But then I realized everybody else was actually scared too. They just wouldn't say it, especially all the other people who were men. And so that kind of entered, that's how I entered Naval Aviation. And then it got ingrained even more in me, like, maybe being a fighter pilot isn't for me. And I really like my helo instructors and not so much the fixed wing TAC air guys. And I mean, don't tell anybody, but I really hated landing. So I did not like that. Point your nose at the ground, watch it get bigger in the windshield, and you have to like speed up. And I was like, this is not for me. So there were a lot of reasons that kind of led me down the helicopter path. And I'm so glad I did. I mean, I think I just fit better in that community, and I really ended up enjoying it, even though flight school was hard for me. But I made it. Yeah. Not everyone does.
No, exactly. I mean, and not everybody, I mean, everything you've told me so far is just absolutely incredible. Not many people have had so many different jobs in the Navy. I'm the one who thought like, oh man, I've got, I was a surface warfare officer, I was an AE and then a PAO, but man, you've also done the same sort of thing where you sort of just weaved in and out and transitioned to all these things. So tell me how long were you a helicopter pilot for?
So I ended up actually being flying for about 10 years.
Okay.
About 10 years. Mostly out of San Diego. I did one squadron out of Norfolk, and then I transferred to the West Coast and deployed 3 times as an aviator, twice as a SO. And I was deployed actually on a regular deployment, routine scheduled deployment when 9/11 happened. And that changed everything. It changed everything for everyone in the world.
Yeah.
For me in my career, because it was finally, I shouldn't say finally, it was, you train and you train and you train for all these potential scenarios and all that stuff. But I think at that time, the world was not that crazy. At least it doesn't seem so in relation to how it is today. And we certainly didn't expect any of that to happen. So when it happened, I mean, we were right there and busted off. Ship got underway. I was on an LHA at that time, so we had it was mostly Marine. So they take the fight. And so we got on our way off the coast of Pakistan, and the Marines went and fought the Taliban. And that was when I think I first really questioned, am I really ready for this? None of us knew what was coming. And we started doing crazy stuff like flying with Berettas in our flight suit pocket. Like, what did we think we were going to do? We're flying around, and if we crash in the water, we're going to like survive that crash and then pull out our gun and shoot the person that's like coming to pick us up out of the water. Like there was a lot of things we were making up as we went along. I mean, Big Navy was making them up, not us in the cockpit.
Right.
It was like thrown right into the fire. Like, okay, all you ego pilots, let's see what you got. And
Right.
it was scary and it was lonely because I was the only woman female, or the only woman pilot on the whole ship, Marines or Navy. And it was,
Wow.
in a lot of ways, it was really exciting and fun. And I really had a great relationship with the guys in my detachment. There were only 6 Navy pilots on the whole ship. And, but in a lot of ways, it was just super lonely. And, you know, as you know, you've been
Yeah,
there.
I
Yeah.
have. It is tough. I mean, it's hard to be with people that are just not your tribe either, that just don't
Yeah.
get what you do or understand where your head is at. And while you can have just the most amazing relationships with the men on the ship, there's just something to be said about I think same sex relationships. And I think this goes for men being able to hang out with other men and women to being able to hang out with other women.
Mhm.
And it's one of the reasons among many why we need to have more women in leadership positions and more women in these tech related fields. And then you've stuck with those fields. So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about how you transitioned from the helicopter community. This is a good segue to what you decided to do next.
Well, yet another fluke and something I did not plan for. So toward the end of my flying career, I was picked up for O5. I knew I had been selected for commander, which was super cool because I finally got to wear the scrambled eggs on my cover. I was, I was so excited about that. And I was actually stationed in Florida at the time, and I my detailer gave me orders to the Pentagon for the first time to be an executive assistant on the staff of the chief information officer. And I remember thinking, what is that? What's a CIO? And what does one of those people do in the Navy? I had no idea. And I have a I have a bachelor's degree in history. I have a master's degree in leadership. I did not take any, I took one computer class at the academy because I had to. And so I'm like, well, what am I going to do on the CIO staff? And then people said, well, you're the executive assistant. You're there to kind of keep the trains running. You're like a glorified secretary. Make sure that your principal, who was a senior executive, he was the civilian counterpart to the uniformed CIO on the CNO staff, chief of naval operations staff. Sorry. And I can do that. I type pretty well. I take
Yeah.
good notes. And what I learned was that it wasn't as much black magic and mystery as I thought it was, because I would ask questions. I would go into meetings and pretend I knew what I was talking about, take notes. Then I'd go out in the hall afterwards and I would ask somebody I knew, what's the gig? It used to be called the Global Information Grid. What's the gig? What is DISA? What are all these like IT things that I didn't know? And that's where I learned to be curious and ask other
Hmm.
people when I didn't know something instead of pretending that I did. So quickly, I learned all this, in air quotes, IT stuff, information
Hmm.
architecture, information assurance, and security. And I realized I can pick stuff up pretty quickly. And so
Hmm.
then, fast forward, I'm on this guy's staff for a couple of years, and he starts giving me like real jobs, like be the branch chief for enterprise architecture, or be the branch chief for information assurance. And I learned a lot. I made good connections. I was a good teammate, and I worked well
Hmm.
with people. So by the time I retired as an O5, they had opened up a job for the deputy to be the deputy CIO, and I applied for that job, and they hired me as a GS-15.
Wow.
Yep.
That's
And
amazing. Huh,
thank you.
that's awesome.
And so all of that now gives me the ability to tell the story to anybody about, don't feel like you have to architect your whole life and your whole career, because there are doors that are going to open that, if someone opens them for you and they have confidence in you, you should walk through it. You should believe people who know you and who you trust, because they can see things in ourselves that we often can't see, because we have these internal gremlins telling us, no, you can't do that. No, you're not qualified. All that self-talk we know is just negative. But when other people have given me opportunities and other people open doors, I've now learned to say, yes, yeah, I'll go do that, because the people that I care about and that care about me wouldn't set me up to fail. And so that's one of the messages that I give to particularly women and girls, because we hold ourselves back so much. And we really should listen to what the world is telling us about what we bring to the world. That's unique and great. And that's how I did it.
That's so amazing. What a story. I mean, Mike is on the show at the moment, and he just said, "Be curious. Good advice for almost everything." Thanks, Mike Cantwell. It's so true. I mean, I think that we sell ourselves short because we say that it's a weakness to ask questions and to dig deeper, and really that's how you learn. And I think that everyone needs to hear that message, that it is okay to not know what you're doing for a good amount of time so that you can learn to be good at what it
Yeah.
is you are doing. Nobody is good at what they are doing the first few times they do it.
Oh my gosh. And this is so, yes, be curious. And also, other people love it when you ask about what they know. They love to tell you everything that they've learned
Mhm.
and know. So not only am I learning, but I'm building a relationship with the other person by humbling myself to ask for their expertise. Tell me about that. When did you learn that? Tell me a story about when, whatever. And so there's like all this win-win going on. And it's just a positive
Yeah.
engagement for everyone. And back to flight school, what I had learned there was we used to have this phrase, everybody's Chuck Yeager in the ready room. So Chuck Yeager is a hero of naval aviation or military aviation, first to break the sound barrier, hero. Well, when you're in the ready room and everybody's studying for their flights and they're memorizing their procedures and they're trying to pretend they're not scared out of their mind and all that stuff, everyone pretends like they got it wired. I know all this stuff. And then when you get in the study group that night at whoever's house that you're practicing the landing pattern or you're practicing your emergency procedures or how to talk to the tower or whatever, that's when people's guard comes down and you realize like they didn't know any more than I did. I mean, some guys did. They already had their pilot's license or whatever, but they were in their minority. So I learned that don't fall for what people show up with in the boardroom or around the big conference table, because a lot of times they don't know everything that they kind of are showing that they know either. And I'm not saying you make it with technical work, and you can only take that so far that you don't admit that you don't know all the answers. But in most jobs, especially technology, because it is changing so fast, there's no way that everyone knows everything. We're all learning all the time. And so, yes, be curious, be humble, ask questions, ask other people about themselves, and you'll learn more than you ever wanted to know. And most of it's
It's
good.
so true. It's so true, Julie. And I think that there are a lot of people out there who feel like they have this knowledge and this expertise to share, and they just don't have anybody who wants to, or they don't think anybody wants to know it.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
that that's what sometimes stifles them, their ability to be able to share that information. That's why sharing stories is so important to me, and that's sort of my mission, is to not just share my story, of course, but to get others comfortable with being able to share their stories, because it's like a weight gets lifted off of you when you've been able to put something out there, good or bad, that has happened
Yep,
to you, and
yeah,
have others relate to that. I mean, I would say that it's probably happened to you many, many times in your career where someone has come to you with an issue and it brings you back to the fact that maybe you had that issue as well.
mhm, exactly. And that's actually a theme that I relearn every time I speak to a group, whether it's women and girls in tech or some company is having their annual women's leadership summit and they want a speaker or whatever. I generally tell the same story, and I've been doing it for about 18 months now. And sometimes I think, this story, this isn't new for anybody anymore. And then I realize, okay, get over yourself. Like, not that many people are following you, Julie. They don't know your story. And every single time afterwards, there are women who are like in tears, like, oh my God, thank you for saying that. I needed someone to say that to me today. I needed to know that I'm not crazy, that I'm not the only one who doesn't understand, how AI is going to change my life, or I'm not the only one. Or, whatever it is, we all have a valuable story, and no one else has the story that we have. And
No,
often we, like you said, we don't believe that. We think,
no.
who am I? How
Who
important
am
am I?
I? I get that so much with people. Like, I'll ask sometimes people to come on the podcast who are just posting on social media, and
Mhm.
they'll really kind of bulk at it. And it's like, at that point, Julie, I just know they're not ready. Like,
Yeah.
They're okay with maybe putting a picture and a nice caption, and they're really getting good at that, but they're not yet at that place. And to be honest with you, I understand where that comes from, because I didn't start off with a podcast. I mean, I started off posting about my dog shows on Facebook, because I was, showing my dog in confirmation shows. And then from there, I eventually I had something, I got a DUI, and I was really feeling reflective. And during that period is when I started my blog. And then I had the blog. So it gave me some kind of a creative outlet to start putting out insights through storytelling. And then many, many years later, I ended up with the podcast and the social media following and the things that I have now. But it's definitely an iterative process where you just have to baby step a little bit and then build to something. But you're absolutely correct. Anyone can be doing what you and I are doing right now. And so many people benefit from it when you do it.
If they weren't benefiting, you wouldn't have the number of followers that you have. You wouldn't have, because I think people are looking for just human interaction. And I don't even know if it's all a function of COVID. I mean, that's part of it. We're beyond it now, but we lost so much human interaction. But just this digital age that we're in, nobody hangs out at the mall anymore. Nobody goes to the bookstore and reads the newspaper and gets coffee and wanders the shelves and chit chats. And we're human beings. We need that. And so
we're wired for connection.
Yeah. And people are starving for it. And, turn the TV off, turn off all the hype and all that. And let's just meet some people who want to be authentic with each other and share our common experiences and give each other hope and maybe share a laugh or two, cry. And so I love that you're building an audience that more people are feeling comfortable listening in, commenting, and then being on your show. It's great.
Me too. It was really interesting, Julie, being at the Military Influencer Conference last month and seeing people that would come up to me and just know who I was or understand my show or my mission just by what I've been doing online. And then and I felt the same way about some of the people that I follow or even like the guests. I probably saw at least 15 to 20 of the previous podcast guest I've had on, because I'm up to 161 episodes. So, there was just the play the odds. There would be some people there that was on the show. And it was so wonderful to have already built that rapport with them, and then to meet them in person and to have that, you just feel like you already know them a little bit, and you feel like you're with your people. And so that's the thing that we all could be doing through these stories. I mean, tell me a little bit, transitioning back to your story, when you were the Deputy Chief Information Officer, what were some of the ways in which you were able to mentor and reach out to others through that role?
Well, fortunately in that role, that expanded. I mean, it was at the echelon 1 level of the Chief of Naval Operations staff. So I then got to know people all across the Navy, people I never would have, because they were mostly information professionals and I came from the aviation community. So we, at different times, the different CIOs that I worked for had recurring meetings of all the echelon 2 CIOs, for example. So all the syscoms, Nav Air, Nav Sea, Fleet Cyber wasn't around yet, but Fleet Forces Command, Pac Fleet. So I got to know who these people were. I wasn't always doing the one-on-one conversation because I was at the I was the deputy, but I would get to know the deputies. And that's how I know all these people now that are some retired 3-stars, some retired captains that rose up from being mid-level at that point, because we would have collaboration sessions, or we would put out a new policy and a tasker through the tasker system. And I'd be the one receiving the comments or getting on the phone with people. And that there wasn't really, I guess Facebook was probably around then, but I don't know if I was really big into it in the early days. So that wasn't, and there certainly wasn't LinkedIn. And if there was, it wasn't what it is today, but it was just meetings, working on problems or working on a policy or working on a task force. At one point, one of the nation state actors got their way into, they infiltrated the Navy's enterprise network, used to be called NMCI. And so the Navy stood up this task force. Maybe you remember it. The
Oh,
Navy
no, they still have NMCI. I was talking to the
yeah.
help desk today a few times. So yes.
So, so we stood up this task force called Cyber Awakening. And that was like the first intentional effort to get after, okay, we got to harden NMCI and like keep bad people from getting into it. And through that task
Right.
force, again, that kind of opened me up to other people across the Navy enterprise, deeper into the systems commands and into NAVWAR, and SPAWAR at the time. And it was just, I'm a connector. So when I find a common interest, or I know people who should be talking to each other, I just kind of like create this web, and
Yeah.
and it remains. That's how I know. A lot of the people I am professionally close with today are from that experience in the Pentagon and working across the entire Navy.
So where did you go next? I know that you're not still there.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Where? I said, where did you go next?
So I was a GS-15. I had ambition. I
Okay.
wanted to be a senior executive. I was in a senior executive leadership development program, and I applied for jobs, and there were a bunch of SES jobs I applied for that I interviewed, but didn't make it too far down the path. And then there were finally 2 within the Department of Navy that I made it to the final 2 candidates. And I was already doing the job in one of the cases, and the other one, I knew I nailed, the interviews and all that. But when I got to the final 2, they picked the other person over me twice, which, hey, hiring managers can make whatever decision they want. But,
Sure.
I didn't look like the people that they were hiring into these roles. And so I kind of had this moment of, maybe they're just not that into me. I think I'm doing a great job, but there's not a future for me. And at the same time, I was a client of Gartner. So that was the employer that I had first out of the government. And my Gartner team knew that I was looking for a new job because they were helping me prepare for interviews, and they were helping me just be ready to step into like a CIO role. And they said, well, you're a great client. You're engaged and you read the research and you talk to analysts and all that. How would you feel about, coming to work for us? And the thought never crossed my mind, Teresa. I thought I was going to work for the government forever. And being a senior executive was top of my, like, I will have arrived if I become a senior executive. And I mean, that's great. And it's for a lot of people, but I just didn't know that anybody out there in industry would want me, because I only had military and government. And it changed my whole life. So I said yes. I applied for a job. I go to Gartner, and I become a coach, advisor to federal agency level chief information officers across the whole federal government. And they were listening to me. And I was helping them, and I was building relationships, and I was learning from them. And it was just such a life-changing thing, an opportunity. And it wouldn't have happened if I didn't have access to Gartner when I was a client. Or in the government, I would probably still be in the Pentagon. I'm sure I'd be loving it, but maybe not.
But it's so interesting too. Like, the majority of people that I know that get a job, they don't get a job because they submitted their resume on monster.com. They get a job because of somebody they know a guy or they know a gal.
Yep.
I mean, that's honestly like every person that I talk to that eventually gets that job, it's because they've built a relationship somewhere along some line with somebody that was able to vouch for them. And was able to say, okay, this person would make a good fit for the company.
Yep.
I mean, would you agree that that's been sort of your experience too?
Yes, absolutely. That Gartner found me. I didn't find Gartner. And it was, like you said, I had built a reputation with them, being somebody they wanted to work with. That's a big ingredient in the recipe of, how strong of a candidate are you? How much do people want to work with you? And that's how I ended up at Gartner. Now, interestingly, that is not how I ended up at Splunk, which was my second role. I knew one person there, but it was my online presence that I had started to build not as robustly as it is today, but I started speaking up, and I built a reputation as a solid advisor that these CIOs in the federal government liked working with. And I found my second job through LinkedIn. And
Really?
yes, and it was the uniqueness of my background, and that I was not a cookie cutter, IT person, in air quotes again, that attracted the hiring manager to offer me a job at Splunk. And that was a whole nother life-changing experience, because then I was in a purely Silicon Valley, hip, cool tech company, software company.
Tell me,
And
what is a typical IT person? I really don't know, because I'm not in the IT world. So tell me what,
I guess I don't mean
without being
typical.
rude. I mean,
No,
I
no, no.
know.
I guess what I mean is by that is like the titles. I mean, like the CIO of agency
Okay.
XYZ. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say like a stereotypical personality or anything, because there's many different kinds,
Yeah.
CIOs, just like
Uh-huh.
every other functional area. But yeah, that's what I meant. Like at Gartner, our clients were, at least in the federal team that I was on the advisory side, our clients were the chief information officers, the deputy chief, the chief information security officers, that kind of group, not finance, not healthcare or anything like that. It was federal IT. That's what.
Gotcha. So you go then off to Splunk. That's the next job. And
Yep.
that's a whole nother type of field for you, because
Yep.
it's hip and it's more of a startup environment. It's more,
Yep.
I bet you were able to take more risks there than any other job.
Yes. It was so great. And my job was to be external facing, and to be, I'll use the word evangelist, to be the technology evangelist for the company with federal clients, to have normal people conversations about high tech, because that's my background. I was just a helicopter pilot that ended up in the Pentagon and learned along the way. I was not a career technician, or not technician, technology expert, or software engineer, or database manager, or I
Mhm.
wasn't. So I could speak everyday person, but tell stories to make technology make sense to people. And not everybody
Makes
has.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, not everybody can do that. A lot of people dive real deep
No.
into weeds, and they start talking about tech stacks and all this stuff, and eyes gloss over, and they stop listening. But for me, they encouraged me and empowered me to tell stories, and to be on panels, and do a keynote, and tell my story as a military government person, and relate it somehow to whatever the technology was. So I got really good at that.
Yeah.
And Splunk, gave me that opportunity. And I was an individual contributor doing that, at least to start, which was also new for me. And I realized that I kind of like that. I love my team,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's nice to just be able to go do your thing, and not have a team to manage. And so that's how I started off at Splunk. And one thing to this day, I just love about that company, there were a lot of things, but in their corporate values statement, honor, courage, and commitment, they had fun was one of the top 5 corporate values. And I thought, that is a place I want to work.
Yeah,
It was
for
great.
sure.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And oh my gosh, as I talk to you, it's just interesting to hear that you were able to just jump around into so many different careers. And then even within a career, you
Mhm.
saw these different sides of the career. You saw the 1,000-foot view at
Mhm.
the chief information officer level. Then you had a different kind of experience as a consultant,
Mhm.
almost, or
Mhm.
coach at the Gardner
Yep.
level. And then you go to a startup. So it's like you've just really seen all these different sides, even to one niche. Um, what would you say your advice is to people who are afraid to leave their current position, or they're afraid to jump into something that's different?
First, let me just make one small correction, only because if people are listening. So Splunk, it behaved like a startup, but it was 20 years old by the
Okay.
time I left there. And the reason I bring that up is not to correct you per
No,
se.
it's all right. All good.
What I learned is that a company can be 20, 30 years old and still have fun. And that's really important because a lot of companies, the bigger they get, it gets very corporate-y and they do, companies exist to make money. They have to be profitable. And there are certain structures and processes that have to be mature and able in order for that to happen. But that doesn't mean we can't have fun along the way.
Absolutely.
And so that was a really important lesson for me too.
Yeah.
So your question was, how do I help people face the fear or concern they have about trying different things? Is that right?
Yes.
I think there are so many people now that, like, through this platform, through this podcast, through LinkedIn, sharing stories about all the different experiences that they have, that it's no longer unusual to hear about weird career paths. It's in the military, you sort of have your path, you do this, then you do that. But out in the rest of the world, that's not really a thing anymore. People don't work at the same company for 40 years. I mean, some people do, but most people don't. And with technology advancing and the way the world is connected now in a way that it wasn't nearly to this degree, when you and I were coming up and going to college, high school and all of that a lot of people are reinventing themselves every time they change jobs. And the more we listen to other people who have that experience, I think the less strange and the less scary it becomes. So that's one thing. So I encourage people to engage on LinkedIn. It's not just for job seekers anymore.
No,
in fact,
it's not.
I forget that that's what it really started out as, because now it's just like learning from each other and sharing. The other thing is, it's okay to be afraid of that. We are human beings, and there's this thing about our primitive brain, from when we were cavemen or whatever the origin story is, that we had to, if we didn't know something, if we had a lack of information, we had to assume the worst because we had to protect ourselves from the saber-toothed tiger that was around the corner. And when we heard the leaves rustling, that's dangerous. So when we don't have information, we assume the worst. So we should go get information and get out of our own head and learn things from other people who have gone and done that. And it's still okay to be afraid as long as you figure out, well, forget what I should be worried about. Let me open mind about what I should be excited about. Yes, it might be weird to leave the comfort of the government and the DOD and people that speak my language and go to a software company where they wear hoodies and sneakers and, don't even own a tie. That might be scary, but it might also be fun. They put on some really good shows and, go travel really cool places and have a whole different kind of experience living their life. So I try to tell people that. Stop focusing on what you're afraid of and just think of what might be exciting for you. Because especially for retiring and transitioning military people, you finally get to do whatever you want, and not what somebody's telling you to do. And take advantage of that. Go find something fun.
Yeah. I mean, especially for those of us who are retired, I'm well aware that I'm in a certain category that's a little different than the majority of people who are transitioning from the military, where I don't have to get another job. And so it puts me in a different, it has me on a different path and looking at it from a different perspective. But I also do think there's something to be said for getting the job that you have to have now. And then if that job isn't the right fit, use that one job just as a bridging to work on that next job that you want to have.
Yes, that is great advice. And when I was in the government getting ready to, I was looking at these SES jobs, and then, I had access to an executive coach. I only had like one session with this person.
Right.
But in that one session, he asked me, how much time are you putting in to your job search? And I was like, well, I guess when I get around to it, maybe I call someone. He's like, no, when you're looking for a job, that has to be part of your job. Now, if you're working full time and you're getting paid by a company or paid by the government, I'm not saying like defraud them and not be doing your job.
Right.
But 1 hour a day is not too much to ask when you are setting up yourself for your next opportunity, or at least a couple hours a week, because it's important. And nothing that's important is just going to fall in your lap if you don't work for it.
Nope.
And so that's
Absolutely.
having a conversation like this. That's calling up and having a coffee with someone you used to work with or someone you met on LinkedIn. Work on your resume, learn how to use AI to write a better resume, whatever it is.
Hmm.
I learned from him to be intentional and start looking for a job before you're really ready to find one. Because with, the best time to look for a job is when you have one, and when you're not desperate and starting to worry about how you're going to feed your family.
By the way, I don't know if you know this, but I actually used AI. You were the first AI show notes I've ever done. So I took you. I'm working with an MC who loves to use ChatGPT, and so now we've been playing around with it, him and I, back and forth. And so when you sent me your bio and it was very long, I'm like, I wonder what would happen if I put it into ChatGPT. So I did.
I
and
love it.
and I
Congratulations!
and I
You
gave
did
it the yes. You're the first podcast that I've ever used AI for.
Wow,
And
I
I did
love it.
I took and I said the prompt was create podcast show notes based on this bio.
Yep.
And actually I didn't use the whole thing. I mean, it had everything down to like links to each job that you had, everything. I couldn't believe it because I haven't been on Chat GPT in so long and I haven't been playing around with prompts that much.
Yep.
But the prompts have gotten so much better
Yep.
since the last time I was on. And I mean, I think that like anything, you have to be careful because anything I know that I'm putting in there, if
Yep.
it's not already public information,
Yep.
then I'm not being safe about information. But if it's
Right.
something that's public information, for a public affairs officer, it's a game changer.
Oh, for everyone, it's a game changer. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I, like most people, have been kind of, we heard about it when ChatGPT was democratized and opened up to everybody else, but it was one of those like, there's probably experts in that. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't have time to figure that out. And then I learned, well, I have one of my very best friends and she's on my personal board of advisors who I met at Gartner as a colleague, now has her PhD in AI and she's all over. May I say her name on your podcast?
Sure. Yeah.
It's Dr. Lisa Palmer. Dr. Lisa Palmer, AI. She puts all this great content on her site and in her business every day. She's an entrepreneur. She started a business consulting on AI and she speaks. And she has taught a lot of people easy ways to use like ChatGPT or the other platforms in a way that gets you used to it. And it's not scary. And it's not like, oh my gosh, I can never do that. And so now I use AI whenever I can. And yeah, you have to go back and check it. And
you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Well,
but then you get better at it.
Yeah. It was interesting. A good example was Ryan Carter, the gentleman who was paralyzed and is fighting for the Ferris doctrine to be overturned. It took out anything that was really like advocacy focused and about the fact that this really happened. I mean, it was so funny how it dumbed down what our conversation was about.
Yeah.
And so I took some of it and then I just added the parts that were like the real like call to action that I had. So I found that fascinating too, how it steers away from some of the more like, I would say, controversial side of some of the things that I do. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That is kind of funny. And there's bias in it too.
Yeah.
So
you
have to really watch for that. But I love that. I love that I was the first guest.
Yeah. You are the first AI show notes that I've done. But man, I think you've created a monster because now I'm like, I'm just going to keep playing around with these prompts because, well, I did it for a job posting on my in my professional world. I took my boss wants us to start putting out job postings on LinkedIn. And if you go on USA Jobs, the description's just, it's not social media friendly at all. And so I literally took the job description and the bullets, I put it into ChatGPT and I said, create a compelling job posting based on these bullets. And it did. It gave me emojis and everything. And you can see it now on the Naval Construction Group to LinkedIn. It was for a buildings facilities manager. And so then I found a building facility manager on Navy.mil. I downloaded it to go with the photo. And it's kind of fun to sort of play around with it.
It's the productivity enhancements are just mind blowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's great. So these days, where are we finding you?
So these days, so now I've gone from Gartner, which was publicly
Yep.
traded company that sells information essentially. That their product is information and knowledge and um, consulting
Mhm.
about
Sure.
information.
Yep.
And I go to a software company, which is
Yep.
different. SaaS, software as a service, also publicly traded. Now I'm at ManTech, and ManTech is a federal systems integrator that it's a government contractor, traditional, um, government puts out a request for proposals and RFP. Companies look at that work and they say, we're proficient in that. We have solutions for that, and we go to bid the work for the government. Very different, all new to me. Yesterday was my 1 year anniversary. So I've been
Woo!
exactly 1 year in one day, and all new kind of work. But and my job there is I'm the vice president of the defense growth organization. So I have business development, capture, and proposals for the defense sector business, which I'm back to my roots. I'm back at defense. I'm back with my tribe. I'm back with my people.
Nice.
And I really enjoy that. The company only sells to the federal government, as opposed to most other companies, Gartner and Splunk being two of them. They have a very small public sector business, and then the rest is they're selling to, the big companies around the world that you've heard of. And what's nice about being in a company that it focuses on the federal government is that you don't have to explain to the executive leadership why it's important to follow,
Mhm.
requirements like zero trust or follow the federal acquisition regulations or RMF
Yep.
compliance.
We
Like,
get it.
you get it. That's
Yeah.
built into our business. But in a lot of other companies, that's not true. And you have to spend a lot of time and effort, like convincing leaders why you need extra consideration or investment. So I really like that. Plus, it's just feels good to be around people. Almost 50% of the company is military veterans. When you add former civil servants, it's probably closer to 75 or 80%. It's a mission first company, and that feels good. It
Yeah.
feels like a place people like to be, and we like to tell other people that we are there, that we're
Mhm.
proud of being at ManTech. And I'm learning every day, because again, this is a different kind of business, a different model. We're owned by private equity right now, so that's different than working for a company that's publicly
Sure.
traded. Constant learning all the time, and I love it. It's helping me. It's like MBA in a day, every day, learning all kinds of stuff, and I take it all in as much as I can.
I love it, Julie. I mean, you've just really given just a master class in resilience and being able to just adjust and do it and get
Yeah,
in there and figure out what it is that has to be done and finding ways to make it happen. I love it. I'm a doer myself, and
yep,
I try to find ways to get to a yes and to get to a solution. And no matter what it is that I've been tasked to do, and it sounds like you sort of have a very similar mindset.
yeah.
And it's been a joy to talk to you about this. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I wasn't always like that. I mean, it's taken me years. It's taken me because most of my military career, I was surrounded by people who didn't necessarily want me to be successful. It
Mhm.
was, oh, women shouldn't be in this and women shouldn't be in that. And no, not my immediate supervisors or anything, but just the
Yeah,
world,
I know.
was not
Yeah,
kind, as you know. And
sure.
so what I also learned along the way is surround yourself with people who are positive and encouraging and also challenge you, not your
Yes.
parents who are always going to say, things are great. I mean, not everybody's parents. I understand that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Surround yourself with people who hold you accountable and challenge you to go do bigger things, and who tell you when you're awesome. And
Mhm.
because we all should be telling our friends and people we care about what they're really good at and what
We
they're
should
really
be,
awesome,
and we
because the rest
don't.
of the world isn't going to do that.
No,
And
no.
yeah,
How did you overcome government apathy? And here's what I mean by that. Like honestly, I've learned to just kind of make a joke about it and be very, I don't know. But there's so many people, not people, but beat down by the system, or there seems to be such an incentive to keep things the way they are, and
yeah,
to just keep the train on the tracks And even if the train goes off the tracks, it's okay for it to go off the tracks as long as it's not too terribly off the tracks. And we're just kind of like, and that's all they, and in government, I feel like there's so much, I don't know, incentive because you're not going to get fired. You're not going to, so how did you overcome that? Because I know you've had to have dealt with that.
Yes. I live in the same world with the same government. However, I will say, and this isn't me being, Pollyanna or just overly naive. There are many, many leaders in the government who aren't stuck in the mud, who do want to make change and do have innovative ideas and want to break glass and make change. And they are also stuck in a bureaucracy of a huge organization. Follow the money. It's driven by
it is.
congressional interests. It's driven by the big prime, whatever. But there are people, and there are more and more who have innovative ideas. And kind of like I suggested, surrounding yourself with people who you trust and who help you be better and encourage you. When you find those people in the government who are speaking truth to power and who, like you, and who are, speaking out, like John Sherman, the Honorable John Sherman, who is he was formerly the DoD CIO. He's moved on to another role in higher education, but he's one who would have this like honest post on every Sunday, and he would be positive. And I like to follow those people because it's like they have great ideas, and it gives me hope that there is positive energy in the government. And there's a lot of those people out there. And just like you want them around you in your personal life, I would encourage you, other people, to, when you find them on LinkedIn or wherever it is, follow them, be in their tribe, put them in your orbit. And positive energy will kind of feed on itself because they also need us out in the world amplifying their ideas. And it's just going to be a brute force. We all have to turn the carrier the same in the future, the direction of the future together. And it is a big bureaucracy, and it is a lot to ask, but there are people out there making a difference doing it.
There are. And I see it every day. And I see people who really embody what it is that needs to happen to make things better. And I think that they're always the gems, and they're always, like you said, they're my tribe, and they're the people that you want to surround yourself with. And it is one of the reasons why too. I mean, I do speak truth to power, and I am very much an advocate, but I'm also very much an encourager and a cheerleader. And I will never stop doing shows that are like the show we're having right now, because I do believe that there needs to also be moments where you just celebrate the wins and you celebrate what we get right.
Yep, that's right.
And I don't want to be the person that's always having the controversial shows, or as I like to say, the thought-provoking shows.
That's exactly right.
But I think you need a mix of both. And I think that's what makes a well-balanced life, is that if you're a person who can celebrate when things go great, and then you're a person who can point out when things aren't going so great. And so and I think that builds respect ultimately.
Go ahead. You asked, like, how do I get over that? How do I?
Yeah, because it's so frustrating.
The people that are just don't want to change. This is also going to sound trite, but I think it's like, if not me, then who? There's nobody coming to save us.
No,
there isn't. And so those of us who have the means and the opportunity and the inspiration, and we want to keep the world being, a safe place and a good place where we want to be, we can't just put our head in the sand and hope all those old coots will go away, because they won't. And so I think that's it. I tell my son, well, he's 20 now, but I've told him since he was little, use your powers for good. Try to do good in the world. And as long as we do that, there's more of us than the haters out there. I know there are.
There are.
Keep at it.
And I mean, honestly, like with the hater people, I just love to just poke fun at them. I mean, that's the only thing I can do. And it honestly entertains me at this point. Like it used to like upset me and really make me mad and like hurt my feelings. But now when it happens, I almost like, I see you. That's why I did that whole thing.
You're one of those. Oh, okay.
I see. Because I just don't. And then honestly, and then if somebody's just being like rude in a comment, I mean, I have no problems just blocking them now.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right,
oh,
exactly.
I don't have to hear that.
That's right.
That's not nice. No.
That's right. That's not nice.
But
Yeah,
it is
right.
kind of entertaining. So I do enjoy I enjoy a laugh about it at this
Mhm,
point because
mhm.
it doesn't really impact me anymore. It just
Yeah,
kind of
good.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So it's a good place to be when it doesn't
Yeah.
bother you anymore. Um, where can people find you if anyone has any questions or if they would like to come see you for mentoring advice? In fact, we didn't even talk about all the stuff you're doing with STEM and with women in science and things like that. Tell me a little bit about that.
Mostly how I engage in that regard is speaking at events. So I now have developed enough of a brand of being an advocate for women in technology and girls in STEM. And I'm still in the technology industry. There's always an opportunity to speak at an event or do a podcast or be on a webinar. And so I don't have the time to really dig a whole lot deeper into that.
Sure.
I'd love to volunteer more. I've learned I say yes to too many things, and then
Yeah.
I spread myself too thin. So now, it's enough for me to every couple months speak at an
Yeah.
event,
Every
and
now and
also
again
and
when you get
also
the
through
opportunity.
yeah, and then through LinkedIn is really it. I am not on the other social. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but really it's just for connecting
Family.
with high school friends and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But the other big ones, I
No.
can't deal with all that stuff.
Well, I mean, LinkedIn is a
Oh
beast. I
my
mean, if
gosh,
you really do LinkedIn right, it's a constant thing where
yes,
you're keeping
yes,
up with it. I mean,
yeah,
people don't really understand how much work goes into it.
yeah,
Work is in you're working on these relationships. I don't mean it in a bad way, but these are contacts that you are continually engaging with. I mean, I
yes,
have people on my show, like comments on certain posts that post and I mean that comment routinely. And
mhm,
now I know them and I know kind of comments they like to make
mhm,
and a lot of them end up becoming future podcast guests. So
mhm,
it's really a wonderful way too. I was telling somebody earlier that when people like yourself who I've just met through LinkedIn, Julie, I would have never known you if it wasn't
nope,
for this platform. And
that's
I
right,
always say that it's one of the most wonderful ways that I've been able to just build a following is
mhm,
through these shows. And you just can't do this with YouTube or with Instagram or
no,
Facebook. They're not engagement platforms. They
mhm,
are mostly one way communication platforms for people to just build a one way following. They're
yep,
not the back and forth engaging that I like to do. So that's
right,
why LinkedIn has always just been my preferred platform.
yep.
So,
So that's where people can find me too.
yep.
And fortunately, and I'm sure you've had to learn this too. I have had to build some habits to help manage the people that come and want to get mentorship and all of that. And I'm perfectly happy to do it. One thing I've learned though is often if I ask someone to do something to put skin in the game, a lot of times they don't. So I'll
Right.
say, go connect with this person on LinkedIn, go watch this podcast, and then come back to me in a few months if you have any specific questions, and
Yeah.
then we can talk. And 9 times out of 10, they don't, and that's perfectly fine because they need to own their own journey also.
Julie,
Um,
that's great advice. I should do that for all the ones that contact me about public affairs because I made a video about what are some of the jobs in the public affairs community. So what I should say is please watch that video and then let me know what questions you have based on watching that video. Ooh, I love
that's
that.
right. Yeah, you're
That's
welcome.
good advice. Thank you. I just picked up a gem right there. I never because and it's funny because officer packages I think are due in like the spring, and because I'm so prominent on LinkedIn, if you just Google public affairs officer, I come up. But now I've also been telling people too, like I'm kind of a thought provoking PAO, so you might not, I might not be the one that you
Yeah,
want advice from because I probably do some things that piss my community off at times. And so maybe, so I always try to say that to people too. Like, you probably don't want my name on a recommendation letter right now. Not to say that it's bad, but I'm not going to make O6 or go on to those higher ranks. And so maybe you want somebody that's on that path. So I get the same thing in my industry as well. But oh
yeah.
man, Julie, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. I think I'm going to take a trip down to. Are you in Mississippi?
Yes, you need to come to Gulfport.
I'm
It's
totally
so
gonna do
beautiful here.
I'm absolutely going to do that.
Honestly, like I had no idea. I mean, I probably shouldn't be telling everybody this because now we're going to have an influx of LinkedIn.
I don't know.
Or, why don't we not come here? Because there's like no traffic. And there's beautiful beaches and it's warm. I mean, someone said the other day in one of my comments, they're like, well, you just wait till the summer. It isn't it's going to be hot. And I'm like, yeah, I'm loving it right now. And, driving the scooter around, loving living on base, not
Sure.
having to drive my car. It's a kind of a unrealistic lifestyle at the moment. But anyway.
That's okay.
All right. Well, Julie, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time coming on the call today. I'm going to go full screen real quick and close out the call, but I do want to say goodbye to you very quickly backstage if you don't mind hanging out for a second. But thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today.
It was my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch the Stories of Service podcast. I will be with you guys next week. I'm going to have Kate Grogan on. She just wrote a book called When Good Jobs Go Bad. It's a very thought-provoking title and just another more of a career-focused show for you all. So I'm really excited to have her on. So I'll probably be putting out some promo feedback about that next week. And then this next month, I'm also going back to Columbus, Ohio, where I'm from. And I do hope to do a few in-person podcasts when I get there. So please stay tuned. Hope you all are having a wonderful week. Happy Halloween. I forgot to say that at the beginning of the call. So I did see some kids doing their trick-or-treating as I was going to and from the gym on base earlier. So that was nice. Anyway, hope you all are having a wonderful evening. As I always close out these calls, please take care of yourself, take care of each other, and bye-bye now.